Alex Monroe woke before dawn, the cool morning air slipping through the thin curtains of his small apartment. He pulled on his uniform, crisp navy blue shirt, polished badge, gun belt tight around his waist, and checked his reflection in the mirror. At 23, he was one of the youngest officers on the force. His dark hair was cut short, his jaw set firm. Today would be a big day, he told himself. He would make a mark. On the streets just outside, the city was still quiet. A few streetlights buzzed overhead. Alex climbed into his patrol car, the engine humming as he slid behind the wheel. He ran through his checklist. Radio on, lights off, scanner set. He tapped the steering wheel in rhythm. He wanted to prove himself, to show he had the focus and bravery every good cop needed. Across town, Colonel Marcus Jackson stepped off the plane and into the busy terminal. He moved with calm assurance, each step measured. He wore plain clothes, a dark jacket over a white shirt, but the medals on the lapel of his jacket signaled his rank. After months overseas, on missions that tested body and mind, he was home at last. He had missed his wife's smile, the smell of home cooking, the laughter of old friends. Jackson paused near baggage claim. He looked around and let out a soft breath. He felt the weight of his journey lifting. Memories of patrols in dusty villages, of keeping watch in the desert, drifted away. For a moment, he closed his eyes and just listened to the hum of wheels on the conveyor belt and the soft chatter of other travelers. He was safe here. Back in his patrol car, Alex listened to his scanner crackle. A late-night liquor store robbery had already been ruled out. A few noise complaints, nothing serious. He wanted anything to test himself. He drove slowly down the boulevard, scanning the few cars and people on the street. He felt alert, ready. Every sense felt sharp. His scanner announced a routine traffic stop in another district. Alex sighed, wishing for more excitement. His partner, Officer Diaz, was on vacation. He was alone. He scanned the street signs and turned onto Maple Avenue, spotted a figure in the dim glow of a street lamp. A tall man in his 50s, with broad shoulders and a steady gaze. The man had a strong posture. Alex felt something stir inside him, an instinct, almost like a warning. Bell, he slowed the car, his foot hovering near the brake. He flipped on the dash camera and edged closer. The man held a small paper cup in his hand, maybe coffee. He walked slowly. Alex studied him. The man's features were calm. His skin was dark, his eyes clear and steady. He looked neither nervous nor hurried. Still, Alex's gut told him to pay attention. He reached for his radio. Dispatch. This is Monroe. I've got a possible suspicious person. Over. His voice sounded steady. His heart beat a little faster. He glanced at the man again. He noted the plain clothes. No backpack, no bag, just a coffee cup. Dispatch replied, copy Monroe. Any further description? Alex shifted. Kay flicked his eyes up and down the man's form, male mid-50s. Muscular build, wearing dark jacket and slacks, possibly military, not sure. He heard no rush on the other end. It was a slow day. Alex eased the patrol car ahead, stopping a few feet behind the man. He clicked on his mic. Sir, can I have a word? The man stopped and turned. Alex saw a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Jackson carefully set his cup down on a nearby ledge. He raised his hands, open and empty. Yes, officer, he said in a calm, even tone. Alex stepped out of the car and approached. He kept his own hands near his belt. Good morning, sir. I'm Officer Monroe. This is the police department. We've had reports of suspicious activity, he pointed at Jackson, uncertain. In the area. Mind if I ask what you're doing out so early? Jackson nodded. Good morning. I just landed at the airport and I'm on my way to see my family. I stopped for a coffee break. He gestured toward the half-full cup on the ledge. His voice was steady and polite. Wore a simple wedding ring on his hand. Alex noticed how calm the man seemed. Alex scanned the street. No cameras. Except his dash cam. No other officers. It was just him and this man. He looked back at Jackson. Did you say you're heading to the airport? Which one? Jackson frowned slightly. No, the airport to here. I just came from the airport. Alex realized his. Aaron nodded. Right, sorry. Which airline did you fly in on? Jackson gave the name. Alex scribbled on his notepad, glancing at Jackson's driver's license. Each detail matched. Alex felt the doubt hover like a cloud. He wanted to trust the man. But something in the man's calm made Alex uneasy. He searched for something more. Mind if I look in your car? He asked, voice low. Jackson stood. Tall and replied, I suppose, but there's nothing there but a jacket and a blanket. Alex hesitated. He had no warrant. He knew it. But his desire to make a big case tangled with his sense of duty. He said, Canadian law lets me search if I have reasonable suspicion. Jackson paused, then lifted one shoulder in a measured shrug. Go ahead. His tone held no anger. Only acceptance. Alex walked back to his car, fumbled with the keys, and unlocked his door. He stepped carefully across the pavement to the sedan where Jackson's coffee cup sat. The streetlight cast long shadows. He opened the passenger door first. Empty. Then he moved to the driver's side. He opened it wide. A small plastic bag lay on the floor, near the pedals. It was white, with powder inside. Alex's heart thudded. He stared at the bag. He knew he had found his big break. He lifted it carefully, thinking of the promotion this could bring. He imagined the looks he would get from the officers back at the station. He felt his chest tighten. Behind him, Jackson watched, hands at his sides. Alex stepped back, brow furrowed. He looked at Jackson. Sir, I'm going to have to place you under arrest for possession. Jackson's face tightened. He stared at the bag. That's not mine, he said, voice calm but firm. I don't know how it got there. Alex felt a jolt of satisfaction and worry, twisting together. He did not believe the man. He believed in the evidence. Stepped forward. Save it for the judge, he muttered, and slapped the handcuffs around Jackson's wrists. Jackson winced but did not resist. As Alex led Jackson back to the patrol car, Jackson looked him in the eyes. You know who I am? He asked quietly. Alex shook his head. Just another suspect. Jackson stared at him for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. All right, he said. Alex placed Jackson in the back seat and climbed in next to him. To secure the door, he flicked on the police lights, red and blue, even though the road was empty. Jackson leaned back in the seat, keeping his eyes on Alex's reflection in the glass. He said nothing more. Alex drove off, the weight of the arrest pressing on him. He told himself he had done the right thing. He had found evidence. He had followed procedure. Yet at the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that something wasn't right. He pushed the doubt down and focused on putting Jackson in the station, booking him, filing the report. He was already picturing the commendation he might receive, the head nods from his superiors. As they crossed a bridge over the river, Alex glanced at Jackson again. The man's uniform jacket lay on the seat beside him, the metals gleaming dimly in the early light. In that instant, Alex had no idea that this quiet, steady man was Colonel Marcus Jackson, hero just back from a Special Forces deployment. Alex saw only what he thought he saw, a suspect, a big bust, an opportunity. And in that moment, as the patrol car sped toward the station, a silent story began, one that would challenge every belief Alex held about justice, service, and the true meaning of honor. Alex Monroe parked the patrol car in the lot behind the station. His hands trembled slightly as he turned off the engine. He had never felt so important, and so uncertain at the same time. He reached back and opened the door to lift Marcus. Jackson out. Jackson stood tall, though his wrists were stiff from the handcuffs. His jacket belt, the one with his medals sewn on, brushed against Monroe's arm. Jackson said nothing as Monroe guided him toward the booking desk. Inside the station, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The walls looked drab off-white paint peeling at the corners. The bulletin board held faded flyers for missing pets and community events. Behind the counter stood Sergeant Lee, a seasoned officer with creases around his eyes from years on the job. He glanced up at Monroe and Jackson. "What do we have?" he asked, voice low and tired. Monroe squared his shoulders. "Sergeant, I pulled him over for suspicious behavior. Found a bag of powder in his car. He claims it's not his." He handed the evidence bag to Lee, who peered at the sodium-like substance inside. Lee scooped up the bag. This looks like. It could be anything. We'll run it through the lab. He handed it back and motioned Jackson over. Name and date of birth. Jackson gave his name clearly. Marcus Jackson, June 10th, 1970. Monroe's chest tightened as he wrote it down. 6 letters of his name on the sheet. Then came the fingerprints, the photographs, the strange click-clack of the camera taking mugshots. Jackson held his head high. He looked straight at the lens without flinching. Monroe watched, uneasy. He could feel the eyes of the other officers on him, whispering behind their hands. A few nodded, impressed by Monroe's bust. Others looked, skeptical, maybe because the suspect seemed so calm. Jackson's blue eyes met Monroe's from across the room. Monroe felt a jolt in his gut. When the booking was done, Lee gestured to a small interview room. We'll take statements in there. Jackson nodded and followed. Inside, the walls were bare metal, the table cold and gray. Monroe sat across from Jackson, clipboard in hand. Jackson's wrists were now free. Lee had removed the cuffs after booking. Monroe cleared his throat. Colonel Jackson, he began, using the title he had not grasped before. Can you tell me again what you were doing before I stopped you? Jackson leaned forward, folding his hands. I landed at the airport early this morning. I was driving home to surprise my wife. I planned to pick up some flowers to bring to her. I stopped for coffee on the way. I did not touch that bag in my car. His voice was calm, his tone respectful. Monroe nodded, trying to look serious. And you have no idea how the bag got there? Jackson shook his head. None. I was tired and focused on getting home. I didn't hear anyone near my car. Monroe scribbled notes. His mind whirled. He remembered glimpsing Jackson's medals. He remembered the steady way Jackson spoke. He still believed in his suspicion, but doubt had begun to grow. Lee watched from the doorway, arms crossed. Monroe swallowed. Do you know the type of powder this is? Jackson asked. Monroe glanced at Lee, unsure. Lee spoke first. Not yet. We'll know once it's tested. Jackson nodded. Monroe took a deep breath. All right. Need to follow up on a couple of things? I need to talk to the store clerk where you bought your coffee, and I need to check your driver's license information against traffic cameras. Jackson agreed and stood. Monroe unlocked the door. Monroe closed into the hallway, Monroe close behind. As they walked, Jackson cast a look back at Monroe. Officer, I want you to know that I respect what you're doing. I know you have a job to do. Monroe stiffened. He did not expect gratitude. Jackson paused. I served for nearly 30 years. I know what discipline and honor mean. I trust you. Find the truth. Monroe met his gaze. I'll do my best. Jackson nodded and walked on. Monroe felt his heart pound. The room felt empty, the hall quiet, except for the hum of the computers. Over the next hour, Monroe made calls. He contacted the convenience store clerk, a young woman with a sleepy voice. She confirmed Jackson had bought coffee around 5 a.m. No other customer had sat in the parking lot. He then called for the dashcam footage from the store's security camera. By mid-morning, Monroe returned to Jackson's cell block. Jackson sat on the bench waiting. His posture was straight, his eyes calm. Monroe handed him a cup of water. Jackson nodded gratefully. Monroe said, the clerk's story matches yours. And the camera footage shows you driving in, buying coffee, and leaving. There's no sign of anyone else near your car. Jackson's calm face tightened. What does that mean? Monroe rubbed his forehead. It means, I don't know yet. The bag could have been planted before you got there. Jackson looked Monroe in the eye. That's what I said. Monroe swallowed. I'm going to step out and talk to Internal Affairs. I want to make sure this is handled right. Jackson stood. Thank you. Monroe left the cell block, closing the door. Softly, he headed down the hallway toward Internal Affairs office. On the way, he passed the locker room, where other officers changed shifts. A few looked at him with raised brows. Monroe pressed on, knocking at the IA door. Inside, 2 agents sat behind a desk, papers strewn everywhere. He stepped in. Sergeant, Lee said, you wanted to talk. One of the agents, Agent Cruz, looked up. Monroe. Sit down. Monroe took a seat across from Cruz. The other agent, Agent Patel, leaned forward. You pulled Jackson over on reasonable suspicion, found the powder. Now you have evidence it might have been planted. Monroe nodded. Cruz steepled his fingers. This is serious. Jackson is a high-ranking officer with the military. Once this gets in the press, it will be a mess. Monroe frowned. I don't want a mess. I want the truth. Patel tapped a file. We need to get all the footage and witness statements. Don't touch anything else related to the case. Monroe nodded. He gathered himself and left, heading back to Jackson's cell. He found Jackson reviewing his phone silent news. Jackson looked up. You worried about what might come out? Monroe sat beside him. Honestly, yes. You're a respected colonel. That bag could destroy your reputation. His phone aside. Then we must find out who put it there. Paused. And why? Monroe studied Jackson's face. He saw genuine resolve. He saw the discipline of a soldier. He felt something shift inside him. This was not just another arrest. This was a fight for justice, Monroe said. I'll do everything I can. Jackson smiled faintly. That's all I ask. They sat in quiet for a moment, two men from different worlds bound by a single quest to uncover the truth. The hum of the station drifted around them, but inside that small cell, partnership was forming one that would test loyalty, courage, and the meaning of honor in ways neither could yet imagine. Marcus Jackson sat in the small waiting area just outside the interview room. His shoulders were squared and calm, though his mind raced. He had spent years training himself to stay steady under pressure, and now that training helped him remain. Composed, he glanced at the clock on the wall, felt slow. Each minute stretching out as he waited for news of the lab results. Officer Monroe stood at the window of the lab office. Watching two technicians handle the evidence bag, he felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had come to respect Jackson's quiet strength and honesty. He knew in his gut that Jackson was telling the truth, but without proof, he could not free him. Monroe tapped on the glass, wanting to speak. But the technicians were busy. He stepped back and looked down at his notebook, filled with scribbles and questions that still needed answers. Inside the lab office, the technicians ran tests on the powder. One dropped a small sample into a clear liquid, bubbled gently. They compared it to a known sample of baking soda. Nods passed between them. They wrote notes and packaged the rest of the powder for storage. The senior technician sealed the bag and placed it in a clear plastic evidence container. He stamped it with a label. Monroe stepped forward as they opened the door. What did you find? He asked, voice low. The technician gave him a thin file. This is a preliminary report. The powder is sodium bicarbonate baking soda. No controlled substances detected. Monroe's eyes widened. He had expected at least a trace of something illegal. He closed the file. Thank you. He walked back toward Jackson, who rose. As he saw Monroe's face, Jackson held his breath. Monroe handed him the report. Jackson's steady voice cracked just once as he said, It's not mine. Monroe nodded. I know. We need to figure out who put it there. Jackson looked around the room. Can I make a call? I want my attorney here. Monroe nodded again and unlocked the cell door. Jackson stepped out and called Mariah Benson, the civil rights attorney he had hired earlier. Within an hour, she arrived at the station, her sharp eyes taking in the sterile walls and flickering lights. Monroe took Benson and Jackson to a private conference room. The table was long and covered in files. Jackson pulled out his phone and showed Benson security footage he had on his cloud storage. This is from the parking lot camera at the convenience store, he said. He tapped on the screen, and the footage played. They saw Jackson step out of his car, buy coffee, and return. The bag was not visible on the first pass. Then, moments later, a figure in a police uniform stepped behind Jackson's car while his back was turned. A quick movement, almost hidden by glare from the street lamp. The figure bent slightly, reaching into the car. Jackson's jacket hung on the seat, covering most of the window. Then the figure straightened and walked away. Benson paused the video. Who is that? She asked. Jackson sighed. I don't know, but it looks like an officer. Monroe's face went pale, shook his head. It wasn't me. I stayed with you. He ran a hand through his hair. I was at your side. The whole time. Jackson nodded. I trust you. But someone else was there. Benson stood and paced. "We have enough here to demand an internal affairs probe and have the charges dropped immediately. We'll need witness statements and all camera footage from the street and nearby shops." Monroe exhaled, looking relieved. "We'll get it." He pulled out his phone and called the department's IT unit for video from 2 other street cameras. He also asked for access to his own dashcam audio and video. While he worked, Jackson spoke quietly with Benson. She took notes and asked questions. "Did anyone else see you parked? Any pedestrians? Other drivers?" Jackson thought back and said, "A security guard walked by while I waited for my coffee," nodded and walked on. "He didn't speak to me." Benson put that down. "We'll find him." By late afternoon, Monroe returned with more footage. They saw the dash cam from his patrol car as it idled behind Jackson's vehicle. The footage showed Jackson buying coffee, then walking back. Then Jackson's back was turned as he opened the driver door. The camera caught a uniformed officer, just the shoulders and a dark cap leaning in to place something on the seat floor. The figure was too blurred to identify, but the uniform patch looked like the city police logo. Monroe frowned. "I need to check the duty roster. Who was on shift in that area?" He tapped his phone and accessed the roster. "Looks like Officer Daniels and Officer Perez worked that beat early today." Benson said, "We'll have to interview them." She turned to Jackson. "You've been here long enough? Let's get you home tonight." Jackson smiled gratefully. "Thank you." Evening light filtered through the window as Jackson left the station, escorted by Benson. Monroe watched them go, feeling the weight of what he had helped uncover. He promised himself he would not let this go. He would see justice done the next morning. Jackson drove to the attorney's office in a rented SUV, his mind still buzzed from the events of the day before. He had felt the first stirrings of doubt about law enforcement, yet he knew they were good officers, like Monroe, who cared deeply about justice. He sat in the waiting room, scrolling through messages from fellow veterans wishing him well. A former comrade texted, "Let me know if you need anything." Jackson tapped back, "Thanks, friend. I may need a witness statement." Mariah Benson's office was bright and organized, with photos of civil rights marches and framed diplomas on the walls. She greeted Jackson and offered coffee before leading him into her study. They sat across from each other at a wooden desk. "I spoke to the security guard," Benson said. "He said he saw an officer in uniform going into your car while you were inside. He can identify Daniels or Perez if we show him their pictures." Jackson nodded. "Then let's do that." Benson printed photos of both officers from the departments. Records the security guard, a middle-aged man named Henry Clark, sat in a chair opposite Jackson. His eyes narrowed as he studied the pictures. "That's him," he said, pointing to Daniels. "I'm sure." Benson thanked him and handed him a witness statement form. Clark signed it. Later that afternoon, Jackson met Monroe at the police department again. Monroe had arranged for the internal affairs interview of Officer Daniels. Jackson and Monroe sat in a small office as Daniels entered, looking nervous. "Colonel Jackson," he began, "Officer Daniels is here to answer questions about what happened this morning." Daniels nodded and sat. He looked at Jackson and cleared his throat. "Sir, I don't know what you're saying. I would never plant anything." Jackson watched him carefully. "You were caught on multiple cameras going into my car." Daniels's face went white. He stammered. I thought. I saw you holding the coffee, and I thought maybe you were avoiding a check. He looked down at his hands. "I made a terrible mistake." Jackson leaned forward. "Why?" Daniels's voice trembled. "I'm sorry, sir. I wanted to help my friend back at the station. He's in a tough spot and asked me to make a bust. I thought if I got some evidence, he could use it. I didn't know it would go this far." Jackson exhaled slowly. He felt anger, but also pity. "You hurt an innocent man because of a favor. You put your career ahead of your duty." Daniels's head sank. "I know, I'm sorry." Jackson and Monroe exchanged a look. Justice would demand Daniels face consequences. Yet Jackson felt compassion for a young officer who had made a poor choice. He turned back to Daniels. "I'm going to recommend you enter counseling and community service. If you cooperate fully, you may avoid jail." Daniels nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you, sir. I'll do anything." Jackson stood and offered his hand. Daniels took it. Jackson said, "Learn from this. Let it make you a better officer." Daniels squeezed his hand and then left the room with his head bowed. Monroe closed the door and turned to Jackson. "Are you okay?" Jackson nodded, though. His heart felt heavy. "I am. But I'm tired of seeing the system fail, good people." Monroe placed a hand on his shoulder. "You help me see the truth of my duty." Jackson met his eyes. "Then let us both continue to fight for it." They walked out together, partners now in a shared cause, one born from an injustice, now on the path to righting it. The next morning, the station hummed with activity, as if nothing unusual had happened. Alex Monroe walked through the bullpen, nodding at fellow officers who were busy typing reports or making coffee. He carried a manila folder filled with camera footage, witness statements, and lab results. He imagined how it would all fit together to clear Marcus Jackson's name once and for all. His heart pounded with purpose. Inside the small interview room, Jackson waited, calm and alert, his suit jacket lay draped over the chair, the medals still pinned in place. He gave Monroe a thankful nod as Alex closed the door behind him. The table between them held the evidence files, photos, and a laptop. Jackson took a deep breath. "Let's start," Jackson said quietly. "Show me everything we have." Monroe set the laptop in front of Jackson and clicked through the video clips. He played the footage from the convenience store's security camera. First, Jackson arrived and bought coffee. Next, the patrol car idled behind him. Finally, the shadowy figure of Officer Daniels appeared by the car. Jackson watched the figure lean in, place the small bag on the floor, then walk away. His jaw tightened. Monroe cleared his throat. That was the first clip. Here's the dashcam video. He switched files, and the dashcam view filled the screen. The angle was different, yet unmistakable. The figure wore a uniform, the shoulder patch hinting at the city police. Jackson watched closely. "That's him," Jackson said. "Same jacket, same movement." He turned to Monroe. "You saw this too?" "I did," Monroe replied, voice firm. "I checked the patrol car log. Daniels was supposed to be on a different street, but his dashcam timestamp shows him on Maple Avenue at just the right time." Jackson nodded, absorbing every detail. Monroe opened the folder and slid photographs across the table. "These are the stills from the street cameras." Tapped each photo. In one, Daniels's face was blurred, but his hat and uniform trim were clear. In another, the stripes on his sleeves matched exactly. Jackson leaned forward. He planted. "The bag framed me." His voice carried no anger, only resolve. Monroe swallowed. He felt sick thinking of it. "I never doubted you," he said. "I knew something was wrong." Jackson's eyes met his. "Thank you," he said softly. He paused. "What will happen now?" Monroe gathered the papers. "I'm filing an internal affairs report today. The district attorney's office will drop charges. Daniels will be charged with perjury, evidence tampering, and misconduct." Jackson absorbed the words. "And after that, we'll schedule a hearing," Monroe said. "You'll give your statement. I'll testify about what I discovered." Jackson nodded again.
Ow.
He closed his eyes briefly, collecting his thoughts. "Good," he said. Monroe leaned back. "I want you to know I'm sorry. I should have seen the signs sooner." Jackson opened his eyes. "You did see them," he replied. "You just needed proof." Gave Monroe a small, understanding smile. Monroe's chest ached with relief. That afternoon, Monroe went to Internal Affairs with the complete package: lab reports, camera footage, dashcam logs, witness statements from Henry Clark, and the security guard's signed affidavit. Watch Agent Patel's eyes widen as Patel flipped through the pages. Agent Cruz read the transcripts of Monroe's calls to IT and the station logs. Patel nodded and said, "This is solid. We'll set up a formal interview with Daniels." Monroe spent the rest of the day helping coordinate the hearing. Meanwhile, Jackson returned home, wary but hopeful. He walked up the path to his front door. Flowers and hand-reel flowers this time, not a planted bag of baking soda. His wife Vanessa opened the door and threw her arms around him. She wept with relief when she heard the news that the charges would be dropped. Jackson held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, grateful for the simple joy of being home. The next morning, Jackson and Monroe met again at the station for the internal affairs hearing. The room was slightly larger than a closet, with a long table, several chairs, and a small camera on a tripod. A recorder sat on the table, waiting to capture every word. Daniels entered first, his uniform crisp, but his face drawn. He looked at Jackson with shame in his eyes. Behind him, his defense attorney shuffled papers. Monroe sat to one side while Jackson sat opposite Daniels. Agent Cruz and Agent Patel sat at the head of the table. Monroe watched as Cruz pressed record on the device. The room fell silent. "Officer Daniels," Cruz began, voice steady, "you are here under investigation for planting evidence and perjury. You may speak freely." Daniels swallowed. He looked at Jackson. "Sir, I'm sorry," he began. His voice trembled. "Didn't plan to ruin your life? Thought I was helping a friend." Jackson nodded for him to continue. Daniels took a breath. "I was doing a favor for an old buddy who had financial trouble. He said if I could find any suspect to charge, the department might help him out. I saw you alone, so I thought it would be easy. I put the bag in your car and walked away. I never meant for it to go this far." He looked down. "I regret it every day," Cruz interjected. "Why did you lie about it afterward?" Daniels' voice cracked. "I was scared. I knew what I did was wrong. I thought if I denied it, it would blow over. Didn't realize how serious it was." He looked at Jackson again. "I'm truly sorry." Jackson leaned forward. "I accept your apology," he said quietly. "But sorry is not enough. Actions have consequences." He spoke slowly, so each word carried weight. "I want you to learn from this. I want you to understand what it means to serve and protect, not to frame someone because of personal gain." Daniels nodded, tears in his eyes. "Yes, sir, I do." Cruz ended the recording. "Thank you, Officers Jackson and Monroe. We will complete our report and recommend appropriate discipline." Daniels stood and left, shoulders slumped. Afterward, Jackson and Monroe sat in a quiet hallway. Jackson placed a hand on Monroe's arm. "You did the right thing," he said. "You saw truth over ambition." Monroe exhaled, relief flooding him. "I just wish it didn't happen in the first place." Jackson gave him a kind look. "We can't change that, but we can move forward." A week later, the district attorney's office officially dropped all charges against Jackson. Monroe watched as Jackson's file was marked cleared. He felt a lightness he hadn't known since the day he first pulled Jackson over. He sent Jackson a text, "All clear, it's done." Jackson replied, "Thank you, Officer Monroe, for justice." Monroe smiled at his phone. That evening, Jackson visited the local Veterans Center, where he had volunteered before his arrest. He found Monroe waiting for him. Monroe handed Jackson a small framed photo, a still from the dashcam showing Jackson walking away from his car before the frame-up. On the bottom, in neat letters, Monroe had written, "Truth prevails." Jackson's eyes shone as he took the frame. "This means a lot," he said. Monroe shrugged. "It's just proof that good still wins." Jackson wrapped him in a brief hug. "I couldn't have asked for a better ally." Monroe stepped back, smiling. They walked into the center together, ready to share their story with veterans and officers alike. Their partnership, forged in crisis, had grown into mutual respect and friendship. In the months that followed, Jackson and Monroe spoke at community events, sharing their experience to teach about bias, honor, and the importance of truth. Jackson's wife and fellow veterans stood proudly beside them. Monroe's fellow officers listened and learned. And so, the framed man, the young cop, and the guilty officer all found their places in the story's ending, not as victims or villains, but as people who learned, changed, and helped make justice stronger for everyone. ChatGPT said, "The air was cool as Marcus Jackson stepped through the doors of the Veterans Center. He had arranged a small gathering for friends, neighbors, and fellow officers. The room smelled of fresh coffee and polished wood. Light from Tall windows made the dust in the air dance like tiny stars. Jackson paused to take it all in: the smiles, the chatter, the sense of relief that had grown since the truth came out. He spotted Alex Monroe standing near a table of refreshments, talking quietly with a young veteran. Alex's uniform looked sharp, and his eyes held something new: pride and purpose. Jackson smiled and made his way toward him. Every step felt lighter than before. "Good to see you here," Jackson said softly, slipping an arm around Alex's shoulder. Alex returned the smile. "Thanks for inviting me," he said. "I wouldn't miss it." He nodded toward the small stage at the front of the room. A simple podium waited there, with a microphone and a small flag tucked behind it. Chairs were set in neat rows, most of them filled. Jackson took a breath and walked to the podium. The room fell quiet. He looked out at the faces: some he had known for years, others he had met only recently during this ordeal. He saw Vanessa in the front row, her eyes shining with warmth. He saw Henry Clark, the security guard who spoke up when he needed a voice. He saw Officers Lee and Benson seated side by side. And he saw Alex standing near the back, arms crossed in support. Jackson spoke in a voice both calm and strong. "Thank you all for coming. We're here today not just to celebrate my name being cleared, but to remember what happened and to learn from it." He paused. "I returned home from deployment with pride in my heart. I served my country the best I could, yet one morning, I faced prison for a crime I did not commit. It took all of you, my family, my friends, my attorney, and one brave young officer working together to find the truth." He told the story again, in short words, the way he would tell a friend over coffee. He spoke of the coffee run, the planted bag, the station, and how the lab proved it was baking soda. He spoke of Alex Monroe, who listened to his gut and to the facts. He spoke of Mariah Benson, who fought for him in court. He spoke of Officer Daniels, who owned his mistake and learned from it. As he spoke, the room filled with nods and quiet murmurs, some eyes misted with tears. Jackson watched and felt gratitude flood him. When he finished, he stepped back and the room erupted in applause. The sound was warm and true, like being wrapped in a blanket of support. After the applause died down, Jackson stepped off the stage. He wandered through the crowd, shaking hands and offering hugs. Each person he met reminded him of how many lives touched his own. He found Henry Clark, the security guard, and clapped him on the shoulder. "Thank you," he said. Henry smiled. "Happy to help, Colonel," he said. Jackson spotted Officer Daniels standing quietly in the corner. He walked over. Daniels straightened at the sight of Jackson. Jackson held out a hand. "I've seen how hard you've worked to make amends," Jackson said. "Keep learning, keep serving." Daniels took his hand firmly and looked up. "I will, sir. Thank you." Vanessa found Jackson then, holding a small cake with white frosting. She smiled and kissed him on the cheek. "You did it," she said, her voice full of relief and love. Jackson hugged her tightly. "We did it," he said. Across the room, Alex watched them. Jackson caught his eye and nodded. Alex returned. In that simple nod, they shared something deeper than words, a bond formed in crisis, now shining bright in peace. Later, as the sun dipped low, Jackson and Alex sat together outside on a bench. The building's brick walls glowed in the fading light. Sounds of laughter drifted out from the open windows. Jackson held a cup of coffee, the same kind he had bought that morning when things went wrong. He took a sip and let the hot warmth spread through him.
Alex leaned forward.
"You know," he said, "I've learned more these past few days than in all my time on the force. I learned that evidence matters, but so does heart. I learned to listen, not just to orders, but to people." He met Jackson's gaze. "Thank you for trusting me." Jackson set down his cup. "Thank you for risking your career to find the truth," he replied. "You could have looked the other way. You didn't." Paused. "You reminded me why I love this country, because of people like you." Alex shook his head. "You're the hero here? You stayed calm and strong when you could have lost hope?" Jackson smiled. "We both did what we had to do." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange and pink. The air cooled, and evening stars began to appear. Each held a cup or a story or a memory. Each star felt like a promise that people can find their way back when they have courage and friendship. Night came, and the center closed its doors. Jackson and Alex walked out together. Vanessa waited by the car, holding the cake plate. Jackson handed her the plate and reached for Alex's hand. They all climbed into the car. As Jackson drove home, the road ahead was quiet and dark. But inside the car there was light of truth, friendship, and justice restored. That night, Jackson lay in bed next to Vanessa and thought of the long path he had walked. From foreign desserts to his own front steps, he had learned that honor is not just a medal on a chest. Honor is what you do when no one watches. It is what you choose when the easy path leads to shame. It is what you give to others, even if it means risk for yourself. Alex, in his small apartment, sat at his desk and wrote the final lines of his report. He described how he followed facts, not fear. He described how he learned from Jackson's calm example, described how he would carry this lesson forward in every call he answered. He signed his name beneath the last word and closed the folder. He turned off his desk lamp and felt a peace he had never known before. In the weeks that followed, Jackson returned to his volunteer work, teaching veterans how to speak up. Monroe moved to a new unit, one that valued fairness and truth above all. Officer Daniels joined a community outreach program at the station. To educate young recruits about ethics, Mariah Benson continued her fight for justice with renewed energy. Their lives went on, each one shaped by the trial they had faced together. They had faced fear, doubt, and injustice. They had found courage, friendship, and redemption. And each day, they chose to remember the lessons learned, that truth matters more than pride, that kindness can bridge divides, and that justice, when it prevails, heals wounds and lights the way forward. In this small town, one framed man, one brave officer, and one veteran's calm strength came together to remind everyone that the true heart of service beats in each of us. And as long as that heart beats, the light of justice will never go out.